Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Reality One. This episode, we're going to be heading into the library. There's so many things to do there and so many exciting things with AR and AI over there that we're about to go into. So before we get into it, today's guest is Etti. Etti's a friend of mine from Brooklyn. Etti, you want to say hi?
Hello, everybody.
I love how I just said like Etti. Etti, that's it. Let's get that straight. So today, just as a reminder for all you new guys just coming into this new podcast, Reality One is a podcast where we share practical use cases of augmented reality. And that's because usually when I talk to anyone and people ask what do, I usually have to explain the technology, usually differentiate it from virtual reality. So I was like, why don't I just do a podcast where we go a day in the life of someone and we're going to go through all these practical use cases of how you guys are going to be using augmented reality in the future. Now, not all of these ideas everyone's going to be using, and some of them are going to look different, but I want to help you guys visualize and understand this technology and see that it's not something that's just sci-fi or something that's scary. It's something that's actually, some of it's possible today, and some of it will just be like regular day-to-day in the future. So that's a little bit about Reality One. And what we're going to do right now is we're going to dive back into the episode. And right at the beginning, we're going to look back a little bit at last episode. So if you guys remember, last episode, we were in the doctor's office and looking at healthcare. Today, we're going to go in the library. So sit back, close your eyes. Let's visualize. We've just come back from the doctor's appointment, and we know we've got some books that we need to return to the library. So we're going to make a quick trip over there. And so we're going to quickly drive home, pick up the books. The first thing that we're going to be doing with augmented reality is we're going to be able to see that kind of information of when the book is due right by looking at it. So again, remember augmented reality, there's no separate apps. There's nothing that is how you work on the phone of today. It's very much in the context in the world. So as I come home and I'm looking at the books I need to return, with augmented reality, I'm able to see hovering right on top of the books or right next to them. It could be a quick timer or just numbers saying 3 days to return. And that's hovering right next to the books. It's not on my phone. It's not an app. It's not a list of things on the phone that I have to then go find the books. I literally can just spread the books out in front of me and see every single one, how many days it is until I return it or when it's due to be returned. So what I do is I pick up those books that I know I need to return, and we're going to head off to the library. First things first, once we come to the library, returning them with augmented reality becomes so much easier. What we can do is, right now, you return books to the library, put in the slot, and then maybe later, an hour later, they collect it. With augmented reality, we can just put it in a chute, maybe put our library card right next to it, or scanned with our face, and very quickly, it gets returned straight away using computer vision. So what is computer vision? Just very briefly. Computer vision is the way of training a computer to understand what it sees. So regularly, with a regular person, you've got your eyes that recognizes and visualizes the world, and then your brain has to process that and understand what's this image, what does it look like, and we compute what we see, we understand. So computer vision is that version of what our brain's doing through our eyes to be able to understand the world. And that's a massive cornerstone of augmented reality. Without it, it's basically a heads-up display where you can see information, but it has no idea about the world. So remember we said before that we looked at the books and we can see how many days it is to return? We use computer vision to even understand or realize what the book is. We can scan and realize the title, the artwork, anything like that. And we can display a lot of things around it on top of it. Returning could become something very simple, like chucking in a chute, realizes what that is, scans what it is, doesn't need a barcode or anything like that, scans your card or scans your face, and very quickly you can see next to it each book, where before you had a countdown for how many hours, days it is to return the book, you can now see maybe returned right next to it, or a tick on top of each book. So you can very quickly, you just chuck them in the bin, within 2-3 seconds you see that timer turn into 0, maybe time backwards. I don't know if you guys watched the movie Timeless.
In Time.
There's a movie In Time, which is pretty cool, but basically, I'm not going to go into the whole premise, but you can see how many hours someone has left to live on their wrist. Over here, you could do the same thing, see how many hours, days it is to return it. That goes back to 0, tick, and you can see every single book has been returned. And you just walk straight into the library. You don't have to worry about anything else. So that's just a quick way of returning. It just makes things simpler, easier, and you can get a very quick visual identification or acknowledgement of going, okay, those books were taken out and now they've been returned. Very quick, very easy. You don't have to wait an hour until they return it or get an email or something like that to see that a list on your phone has been checked off. You see it per the actual real book. Etti, you ready to walk into the library?
Absolutely.
Etti and I are about to walk into the library. I had a great day today so far with augmented reality, and Etti is joining me in this library. It's her first time in a library with augmented reality.
Remind me, augmented reality you can experience through glasses or contacts.
Yep, you can do glasses, contacts, and today you can actually use a phone or an iPad. So most people's first experience with augmented reality will actually be what's called mobile AR. And that is using the phone. Again, remember how we said we need a computer vision? So we're going to use the cameras at the back of the phone to understand what's happening. Then the processing power, whether it's machine learning, computer vision users versions of that, all that can either be done on the cloud or on the device. And then your screen is looking through it. So I'm sure many of you have used things like this before. There was, I think, the beginning of COVID, a lot of people, their first, besides Pokemon Go and those kind of things, those kind of very early mobile AR games, a lot of people probably remember going on Google and seeing animals that they can place in their rooms. That's augmented reality with your phone. If you've got an iPhone Pro of any of the last couple of years, you'll have an extra little black circle that's called a lidar. And that actually helps you understand depth and measurement and get a better understanding of the world. So it's not just, so you can use computer vision, which is just the RGB value, which is just the color and recognizing what things are. Actually, if you open your phone up, there's an accessibility mode that you can understand the world. When you point your camera at it, it'll actually tell you what it's seeing. So when you point your camera, we should actually have a go at it soon, but if you point your camera at a bed, it'll say soft bed with 3 pillows on it. Or you look at a room and it'll say white walls with a couch in front of it. That's all computer vision. That already exists on your phone. Augmented reality is then taking that information and being able to put in digital information. So it's not just 3D models. It's anything that you want to see. Holograms, visual information, any instructions, anything like that. But again, big word with augmented reality, besides all these technologies, is context. So we're actually getting an understanding of the world straight on the piece of information we want to know about.
Context. Absolutely love context. This is brilliant.
We're also going to be using a lot of AI in this podcast. So the first thing we go in, nowadays when we go into a library, we've got librarians. They're happy to answer any of our questions. They're happy to walk around with us and show us the books that we might want to know. And usually very sweet, very helpful. But let's look at ways of using virtual librarians, virtual assistants that can accompany us. Like in movies like Harry Potter or things like that, where we have ghosts walking around helping us out. Imagine ChatGPT kind of versions that you can go in, you can ask questions. You can not just ask where books are, but you can walk around with a librarian.
So what would be the difference if, let's say, you had an assistant? How would that not be AI? What makes that AR? Or would it be AI? Are you incorporating?
Great question. So AR would be the version of the assistant that you can visualize. So if the assistant is a little floating orb that just sits above your shoulder and accompanies you, or it actually looks like a hologram of a human being walking next to you, and everything in between, the visual aspect of that is AR. The AI aspect is the knowledge behind it. So it can be a ChatGPT version that manifests in a very visual way through augmented reality. So today, a lot of people, the way that they're working with AI, generative AI, anything like that is very text-based. You can use a basic computer, doesn't matter. What we're going to be using is we're saying AR, that assistant can now live in the world and it can give us the context. So what's one thing that an assistant can do? An assistant can point us to the right book. So we can use augmented reality where we can have the assistant walking next to us, but imagine if we saw arrows on the floor that we can just follow to the book. Or imagine if we can highlight the books we're looking for. And we can walk and we say to this AI assistant, hey, I'm really looking for things about historical Germany, let's say. Now, the assistant, a regular assistant, could just point us to a couple books or walk with us for a while. A virtual assistant can say, no worries. We actually know, based on your past history, the books you've read in the past, we think these books you'd love. And those books actually highlight the real books themselves. So you could look at a whole row and 7 books now are pulsing green, or they've got an arrow on top of them, or some sort of thing that helps you recognize them and highlight them from the rest of the books.
And there's like different categories that you can have to choose from. It's not just the ones that like, we choose these 7 books. You're an entire library.
Yeah, it's not just 7 books. You can work with the entire library. You can see different colors, different tags.
Categorically, like what's going to be of more interest, what's going to be more factual, some with more fiction, anything that, yeah.
Yeah, precisely. All that information, instead of just pointing to those books, we can visualize that information. We're going to get into it a bit, but we don't have to visualize just with highlighting or colors. Imagine if you can see a hologram of the author's face just hovering next to the books. And you can be like, oh, I know that guy. I really like his books and I've built a connection with him and now I can see his face hovering next to the books. Or I might see that you've read this book, you might really like that book. Or I could see some scenes of the book, or the title could come to life. So instead of when books are on the shelves, you only see the binder. You only see column. I'm not sure. I'm sure there's a name to it. But you see the title on the side. You don't see the actual cover page, the title page. You have to pull out the book. Here, I could have that title page hover next to the book, animate in 3D.
With visuals accompanying it.
And those visuals will help you also find the books. So also with finding the books, remember, I could walk you through the library and show you, this is book 1, this is book 2, and I can navigate you. So a big thing of AR is navigating contextually, right? You can use an Apple or Google Maps on your phone that might show, not many people have indoors. Indoors is a massive thing where navigation could help us. But beyond just the little dots that we follow to find the book, it's also maybe making an entire, let's say, treasure hunt out of it, where we're using different visuals or different methods to find it. And the librarian could actually turn into the author themselves. So as they present you to a book, it's not just a librarian that is talking to you about the book. It could be the author themselves with the AI of all their knowledge and book they've given, that they can give you a synopsis. So the blurb actually comes to life with this AR AI avatar of a librarian that's walked you around but is now presenting and like selling you the book.
Brilliant.
Yeah, virtual librarians can turn into anything. They can know your history. They can give you an entire summary or point you to the books that they know that you'll like based on things that you've pulled out before, based on things you've read before, or conversations you've had. And you can continue these conversations with your virtual assistant when you sit down on a beanbag and you've pulled out a bunch of books in front of you. You can keep that conversation going. So that knowledge is not just limited to the book you're about to read and all that knowledge you're about to inhale from that book, but you can have the context of the author and the entire story dynamically played out in front of you and that you can interact with.
Does the AR and the AI have some sort of understanding about the way you specifically process information?
Yes, yeah, definitely. I mean, this is not something that's really built into so many of the AIs we have today that we're learning, but it's definitely, we know that OpenAI is working on some crazy personalization, and this is on their roadmap over the next 2 years, to get more nuances of who you are, how you understand things, your context behind you. So they're answering based on you. And if we just look at this going forward in a couple years, this AI is not going to be just a librarian that's going to be meeting you in a library. This AI turns into your flight assistant or travel agent when you want to book a ticket. This AI is going to be your teacher when you're trying to learn something. Personal assistants, and we should get into this another time, but years ago I was developing a product that I call Augmented Sound. And a big part of it was that today we don't really use audio and visual to communicate with our devices. They're primarily all visual. But when you get into personal assistants in this idea, we're going to start using sound. The audible spectrum is going to become much bigger in the way that you discuss things from your computer. Because before, where you would pull out your phone to see notifications or apps, soon that will be discussions, conversations. And so that's why I was working on a device that actually was augmented sound and lived in your ear and was something that you always connected, because that's about to be the way that we're going to communicate with our computers. Today, we think of computers as laptops and phones, and we communicate with them just with the visual, we sit there and type away. Where you can think about it is we're kind of the slaves to the computers. They're masters in a way. We need to always find a place where, are you charged in? Is the laptop sitting on a table? Do I need a chair to sit properly, or a standing desk so I can stand, be able to have a proper posture that I can work kind of at the whim of the laptop? But the way that I see it is these things are going to go very natural. The same way that when you deal with people around you, you can be sitting on a beanbag, you can be chilling on a rowboat in the middle of a lake, you can be walking or taking a jog, and you can discuss and connect with humans. That's the way that you should be connecting with a computer. They shouldn't be all keyboards and mice and sitting properly right next to a charger. You should be able to, whenever you want, start a conversation, continue a conversation, ask information that you would never known before.
Fully engage with it like you're engaging with another person.
Precisely, with all your 5 senses. So let's go back to this librarian. This librarian is going to know all about you, not because they're the librarian that you've met in this library, but they're your personal assistant in your entire life. And they know so much about you, and every time that you communicate with them, they get to know more about how you think. Are you a visual processor? Do you like to discuss things? Do you like to converse? Do you like to think through things? What is your type of intelligence, right? And there's so many different concepts of different intelligences, and I'm sure you can enlighten us on that. One of the ones I know, there's some people say there's 7 intelligences, some people say there's 9 intelligences. There's people that are social thinkers. They have social intelligence. They know how to work a crowd. Some people are academic. Some people are very visual learners. Some people learn by hearing things. So that's why we're saying, like, in today's education system, it's a little bit broken because it's designed for the person that reads a textbook. It's very visual. It's not necessarily good for everybody else. And we're going to get into education in another podcast, and maybe we'll have Etti back on. But we're going to talk about how those kind of, the schools or the education system becomes a lot more personalized.
So in this case, it can enhance all those other areas, all those other contexts, because it's inclusive of all different types of processing.
Precisely. And it's going to get used to and understand your best way of processing. So it might show you information. It might discuss information with you, or it might put up maps or 3D models of things.
Or like videos, like film.
Yeah. And go through film. Interactive films are going to be a huge thing. I think that's something that we might be talking about on this podcast in a bit. But right now, we've found our librarian, we've walked around, we've found some books we liked, and maybe we're sitting on a beanbag on the side and we're reading through it. And the librarian is still there and we're still discussing things, and they're connecting with us in that way. Another thing, just actually before we've sat down, or if we have books displayed in front of us, so seeing all that information, we did touch upon it very quickly, but to be able to show the summary, so we talked about that, showing the trailer of a book. Again, that blurb coming to life in front of us. It could be an entire reenactment of what's happening. Actually, something that I think might be a really cool idea is 3D bookmark. So either picking up a book that you've read before, most likely that's what a bookmark is, right? You've started the book before. But instead of a bookmark of today, where you just have something inside that reminds you of the page, imagine if you could just come close to a book, or you can peek at it, or even open it up to the page you're in, and it gives you like a little reenactment scene. Imagine like a small little 3D model of the world. Let's say you're reading Game of Thrones and you're up to a certain scene. Now, you're reading a book, right? You're not watching a movie. But when you open up the book, imagine if you could have something like a 3D bookmark that just shows you the last couple pages in like a 3D animation in front of you that kind of catches you up to where you are. So you can read.
Like how at the beginning of an episode, they have a recap. Right.
Precisely. So that could work right on top of a book. So we could do that in 2D, right on the paper. But imagine a 3D reenactment. For me, when I think about this, I visualize like the opening scenes of Game of Thrones, and it's got a very 3D kind of like map as a drone shot that kind of moves through things. So that's what I'm like. Imagine if you had that not just in front of every episode, but anytime you're up to something, it'll take the last 5 pages of the book, generate a 3D animation specifically for you, and you get to watch it in 30 seconds and remember where you're up to. This is a huge part of generative AI, because you can think about it. With generative AI today, you can copy paste 5 pages in a book. Then you can ask today to generate a script or write something for you. Now, that's all text-based. But generative AI is getting so powerful that soon we'll be multimodal. We'll be able to input any type of information, and the output will also be any information.
I don't know if you know the answer to this, but I'm so curious as to how this is going to affect memory ability.
That's a great question. And it's something that we're dealing with today already. Like a lot of people, I mean, myself very much included. I'm not sure about you, Etti, there's a lot of things that I just give over to, whether you want to call it Google or whether you want to say it's on my phone or Apple has it in my notes or anything like that. There's a lot of tasks that I don't just keep in my head. I put them onto my reminders or Asana, and it collects everything. And we can see this as non-biological memory. That's what computers are. And that's AI is non-biological intelligence, artificial intelligence.
Literally like a second brain.
Precisely. And there are lots of back and forth as if this is a good idea, if it's a good idea to rely on an auxiliary, rely on another. And the question is like, what happens if we lose access to that? And it's a very good question. I think my feelings of that is that I'd rather be supercharged to a point where I see it more of a superpower. I don't see it so much of a limiting factor, because when I supercharge, I can go 10x, 100x, 1000x beyond what I can normally do.
Describe supercharge again.
So I see it more of, let's even use the word superpower. Like for me, I can memorize I don't need to memorize thousands of things because those things are there in someone's memory. Now, my memory is going to be infallible. So back in the day where maybe you didn't have as many things on your plate, or you weren't traveling to many places, you didn't have to remember so many things, you could remember them. But there came a point that you had to. And that's where writing came in, right? Years ago, a technology, many people might not classify the language or even writing down language as a technology, but it is, right? The idea of history, the idea of books is a technology. It's the idea that no longer does my biological brain have to learn everything itself from the beginning. I am actually relying on someone else's intelligence. When I read a book, I'm tapping into someone else's knowledge. I am feeding off of their brain and I'm climbing on it. I'm using it. So that's what the internet is.
Which is actually also essential for intellectual development in general.
Precisely.
Like feeding off of something else.
Exactly.
Enhance your own abilities. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. If all of us had to grow up and learn everything from scratch and couldn't work off someone else's knowledge and information and wisdom, we wouldn't be anywhere close to where we are. I would argue that the technology of speech, the technology of language, the technology of writing down and giving it over to next generation is what has supercharged us here. So this is just that next evolution where before you can write down a certain amount of things, or you had a limited writing abilities, or even writing books that you could distribute to many people and many people could work off, was very limited. Now we've expanded that to a crazy point. And that we're literally in that world right now. We're sitting in the library right now, in this virtual library, and we're surrounded by information that doesn't belong in our brain. It's information that we're looking to retrieve, and we're looking to suck that information into our brain. Now, augmented reality and AI says, why do we have to suck that into our brain right now? What if that can be sucked into a non-biological memory, processed with non-biological intelligence, and then given to us in our medium? So instead of having to read hundreds of books, we could have that knowledge at our fingertips precisely when we need it, personalized for that.
It retains the information for you.
Exactly. Now, that does definitely have the limit of, if we don't have access to that, then we're losing a lot of that. But that access anyways is a superpower. Well, what we have access is like something that we can't even get there by ourselves today. And so by having that possibility, even though there is a point that we could lose it, by the very fact that we can have that is absolutely massive. And this is something that I did also read years ago. I was talking about this idea, and okay, we'll go back to this device. I called this device a Whisper, and it was augmented sound, and it basically fit on your ear in such a way that it wouldn't block your ear canal, so it didn't raise psychological barriers between you and others. And the idea of it was, if you always have sound and a microphone available to you at all times, and you didn't have to remember to pull it out of your pocket, as seamless and convenient that AirPods are, you still have to have that pairing process. There's still a little bit of a gap. You can't just think of a thought or just murmur something to remind yourself. It's not available at all times. And so having a device that is designed for this new world of a personal assistant that you want available at all times, and you want the personal assistant that doesn't just react to instructions, but rather that personal assistant is conversational, and it can start that conversation and doesn't have to wait for you to start. That's a whole new world of the way that you interact with a computer. A computer is no longer just applications. A computer becomes a personal assistant. And when a computer becomes a personal assistant that you can discuss things with, game changes. Completely changes. Everybody's been blown away by ChatGPT. Imagine ChatGPT that is learning your history as you're going through it. Again, we can come back to this librarian.
It's like Iron Man's suit.
Precisely. It's Jarvis. We're literally getting to this point of everybody being able to have their own Jarvis. I remember when Iron Man came out, I was watching it and I was like, I wish I could have that, but I'm not a billionaire. Then I ended up actually meeting the designer of Jarvis, the creator, the person that actually designs for the movies. He's called a FUI designer, a future user interface designer, or a fantastical user interface designer. His name is Jace Hansen, a guy that I really respect. We're going to have him on the podcast, maybe actually in a really cool way. And he's an epic guy. He designed Jarvis and he does all the future user interfaces for Star Wars, all these Hollywood movies. He's a crazy guy. And we've discussed this idea of being connected to Jarvis so many times over the years. And now everyone's actually able to get access to it. That's why when people ask me, oh, ChatGPT, should I try it? Or it seems like it might be such a, I can't have access to Jarvis or I can't have access to ChatGPT because it's silly or it doesn't have that power. I usually tell people, try it out, 30 days, and see what you can build with this agent of yours. And I would actually highly recommend all you guys, Etti, this means you as well, go to ChatGPT. It doesn't have to be GPT-4. It doesn't have to be the crazy versions, but try and make yourself a librarian. Try train one of your conversations to learn a little bit about you, input all your favorite books, ask it to give you synopsises, ask it to give you suggestions on new books to read, or write out scripts for books that can give it to you in 5 minutes.
So you can build a relationship enough with your own AI. Yeah. You're building the relationship with the AI, and the AR is the part of it that is being visualized.
Precisely. AR is what contextualizes it and brings it into the world. So let's also pull back and look at it again for a second. Mobile AR is still limited to these devices that you hold in your hands. Now, I can point the camera at something and look through the camera interface, and through that, I have augmented reality. I can look at a guitar, get information about it, but you're still holding something in your hands. AR basically is this whole new world where, okay, again, let's look at the phone. All these things on the home screen, they're their own apps. For example, I have an app that controls my Wi-Fi. That has no connection between what's actually going on in my house or where the placement of the actual devices or how powerful they are. It lives on my phone. It has no context to the world. So any information that it wants to tell me about the Wi-Fi at my home lives on a phone. So I have to show it through icons. I have to show it through lists. There's no context between the world. AR is going to blow out of this entire paradigm of this, whatever inch, 6-inch screen, 10-inch screen, 50-inch screen. It's going to blow through this small little window that has no connection to the world around me in Apple's keynote of the Vision Pro, which I'm not a huge fan of, and we can discuss the Vision Pro. I've done lots of mind streams on my LinkedIn that I go into the different limitations and where it is at and where I think it should be. But they actually have a great line, and they say that this is the first computer that you're not going to look at, you're going to look through. That's what augmented reality is. It's taking our reality that all of us work with and saying, this becomes our computer. We layer on information on top of this world. No longer do we deal with this small little 6-inch screen that has no idea about our reality around us. Augmented reality breaks out of that and lives on anything.
Bringing it back to the library, we are going in with this AI that has accumulated all this information about us on a more personal level, right? That's what you're building a relationship with, is your AI. And then it allows you, the AR is what shows up in the library to allow you to see, honestly, infinite options within books.
Exactly. Yeah. So the AI is what's able to get the information. And also part of it, the machine learning that computer vision does use is also how to understand the world. But connecting with that AI is through that virtual librarian. That's the AI and all that information that I can communicate with it. AR visualizes all that. So finding the book in context out of a row or an aisle of 100 or 200 books, AR contextualizes and shows me that's the book that you want. And when I come to it, I can hover over the book with my finger, or I can just look at the book.
Get like other sources to other books when you open the book from different information sources, footnotes, all those things can be showing.
Precisely, yeah. So if we now transport ourselves back onto that beanbag and we've got a book open in front of us, AR multimodally opens up what's on the paper, and I can tap on a word. And maybe on top of that word, I can hover the translation. Or I can tap over a footnote, and instead of having to go get that book or go back to the end of the book and lose my space over here, I can have that little footnote or that book next to me. That physical book, if I'm in the library and if it's in eyesight, could start flashing.
Question. When you are, let's say, opening up a book and reading it, are you having verbal engagement with the AR and the AI? Are they reading brainwaves? What's happening there when you want to know more about a page? You want to switch categories, things like that. What's going on?
So right now, I think things are going to be very visual, right? So through the glasses that you're wearing on your face, or again, this is where you can see that mobile AR is not so comfortable because you don't want to point your phone in front of a page and then look at the information through like the camera screen. This is where the infinite canvas of glasses or contact lenses, without having to also use your hands, you can see AR really shine.
But if let's say you're using glasses in this scenario, am I saying, AR, show me this? Or is it picking up on already what I need and what I want? What's the level of intelligence within that?
Great question. Today, that level of intelligence is still a little bit limited, right? It probably would ask us for a couple of things. For example, brainwaves. The EEGs and the machines that pick up this information are still very new. Those sensors are not necessarily designed or available to us in such a way that everybody has access to one. But AR will take many different sensors. Now, that could include brainwaves before. There's some great research papers nowadays, maybe a little bit scary, but there are research papers where they place someone through an MRI or they're scanning brainwaves with different machines and they're able to, the computer, right? So you've seen generative AI with like images, right? And you've seen generative AI to like kind of videos. They're able to use certain brainwaves and see like blood flow, things like that in your brain, and use that to recreate what they think the image is. And some of these things are actually starting to look really similar to the image that they're showing the user, right? So they put the user through a machine, they show them a picture of, let's say, a horse. Or even now they're showing them even fields, or let's say horses running in a field. Through the AI and through the sensors, they're able to generate videos that are starting to look more and more like what you're actually seeing. We're getting very close to mind reading. So very soon we could have access to what I'm actually thinking about before I speak about it.
Are the libraries going to have to update in and of themselves in order for us to access them? Or can we be doing this in old libraries, antique books? Is it coming with us, or is everything going to need to upgrade with the AR?
Love this question. We're actually supposed to get to these things at the end, but let's chat about them now. If you remember, we spoke about the gym, right? A couple episodes ago, we talked about the gym. And the first thing that I started dealing with the gym was looking at how we incorporate AR into current gyms. How do we bring that into the way that we work out now, the weights, the machines that we use, the current traditional, or let's say classic gyms. And then in the next section, we started talking about what gyms could look like in the future. And what we shared is it could look like a warehouse or like a laser tag area where you're jumping over obstacles that are physically there, but AR creates an entire scene. It could be a battlefield. It could be snowy mountains that you're hiking up. It could be all these things that you incorporate different workouts. And I would say that my answer would be the same with a library. In the very beginning, we're going to be utilizing current libraries. And I think that a lot of old libraries have beautiful architecture and they've got so much history in of themselves. So we've talked about things so far in this episode of things that work very well in current libraries. You're finding books. You're going through aisles of books. You're sitting down at a desk or on a beanbag or somewhere comfortable and you're reading through the physical books. And you're dealing with a traditional library where all the information is stored on paper. Now, there's something still very amazing about paper. And I think those are going to last for a while just because it's a crazy medium. But and AI is going to take it to the next level. It's going to merge the internet, which we think of something as separate, right? Oh, why do I need to go to a library where I can go on YouTube? I can go on Wikipedia. You can use the internet and all those different ways of getting books, but there's something about that medium that people use. So I definitely want to get into this idea of simulation and really getting into it in the future libraries, and we're going to get into it. But let's first very quickly finish off current books, right? So very quickly, we went into a few of those things. So again, like you said, how do I find other things? Imagine if looking at a book and I could see a little line that connected it with another book and said you would really like that. Imagine like a mind map type of thing coming in front of you that is snaking between all these books around the library. Or maybe think of like vines growing in the library, like a visual that like grew out of your book and then just started tapping and blossoming in front of all these other books and says, find this, that does that, and all these things. So that could be connecting you with actual.
Choose your mind map.
Exactly. It works around you. You can ignore certain offshoots. You can run onto other things. And it's like connecting you with books. That could be something cool. Another thing, like we were seeing before, we were looking at like this idea of showing summaries, trailers. Another thing could be a character. Think of it, if you had like your book open and then you wanted to know a little bit more about a character, imagine like tapping on one of the character's names or something and he appears, visualize this, a little mini character then appears standing on the book or on the table next to you. And you could ask him questions of where you're up to in the book. Of, hey, what is your emotions right now? And this is all being fed from AI. And all this, I'm just like, this is crazy. If I could be like reading a book and having a conversation with a character, and not just the character like of the entire book or the beginning, exactly where I'm up to. What are you thinking now? Are you scared? Why are you making that decision? What do you actually think about this person? Like, you could also try to figure out what's going to happen in the book by questioning him or things like that.
That completely changes the face of storytelling.
Storytelling becomes interactive, but not in the idea of like interactive, oh, this is Goosebumps or turn to page 78 for this kind of like level. Although that would be so cool, reading Goosebumps and like actually visualizing it and going through these periods of flipping open books and things like that. That would be really fun. But this is so simple, like character info. Or imagine if you had, like again, I'm just visualizing Game of Thrones. I don't know why. But imagine if in the moment you could just have an image of what the castle looks like. And you could just be like, you could turn around and see like the dragons flying around it, but really visualizing it. Harry Potter is really good. For me, I loved it because of how close it was to my imagination. And I think a lot of us had this experience of, we read the books and then when we saw the movie, we're like, wow, these characters look so similar to what I had in my mind. That's the power of the author, of how she helps that imagination. Now, with AR, and maybe the books where the author is not so with this visualization, imagine if during it I could pause it for a second, stop reading the book, and just get a visualization of what Hogwarts looked like or what the castle looks like. I could have it interactive, again, like that interactive trailer. But here I'm like looking at different areas of where I'm in to give me that. Or imagine if like you're sitting down and the room around you like changes to even the backdrop.
That scene.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be necessarily the entire scene like a movie, but it could become like the backdrop. Imagine sitting in a library.
Like you can walk down the street with the character and kind of see what they're seeing.
Precisely. But I would just say over there, if we're going to be walking, that's probably either we're going to leave that to the future library that's designed for that. Because if we walked in a regular place with the way that libraries are designed, with augmented reality, we're going to...
It's a little more virtual reality. Yeah.
Exactly. That's virtual reality. That's going in that world where you can use a special treadmill to walk around, or you're in a specific environment for walking. Augmented reality, we have to be a bit careful with walking because...
You can basically just be able to visualize the environment and the setting that the book is in.
Exactly. Imagine if you're in the setting of a forest and just around you, trees are just popping up in the area. Or things are... So you're still in a library, you can still understand that. But the scene morphs just to give you that real feeling. Like it becomes eerie. Like if it's at midnight, like things dim down and you really feel like you're in the setting. So maybe you don't see like the character. You could probably also just choose how much. But I'm also just thinking like, I don't even have to see the characters necessarily. Just give me that environment. I want to feel.
There's an element to reading a book, especially in like novels where you're really getting to know a new character, where you start resonating with that character. So the idea of just sitting in a chair and all of a sudden the environment surrounding you and you're experiencing what the character is experiencing is huge.
Yeah, like you feeling like you are the character. Imagine like parts of the character actually displays itself on you. So maybe when you look down at your hand and the character has a ring, you're wearing a ring. So you're feeling like you're actually seeing first person the character. Exactly. That's wild.
That's a huge part of reading.
Yeah. It completely changes how you can also dial in how immersive you are of how things go. And again, remember, we're still talking about a physical book. We're not even looking at all the crazy mediums that become separate from the book. We're looking at mediums that are augmenting the book. We're still sitting in a library on a beanbag. We're still reading a paperback book.
This feels also less scary to have in the world in a way because you're utilizing what we already have. We're not like getting rid of things that, are important and a lot of people hold value to. With a lot of technology, I feel like the past gets left in the past, but this is a really beautiful way to utilize what we already have and just expand on the experience.
Precisely. Yeah, sometimes virtual reality can just be too artificial, too virtual, too fake. And it's going to another world where you don't have to necessarily respect physics or everything changes. Here, we're still very much in this world. We're just augmenting it. And these are just different ideas of augmenting books. So I've got the character. We talked about finding books easily, of them getting highlighted, walking away, being navigated through a library. We talked about finding like-minded books, the idea of like lines or vines or really anyway, like that's just a very quick idea. We talked about 3D models hovering above pages. So I kind of use that in this sense of seeing the scenes or the buildings. But like when you open up a science book, and already this is what a lot of people already are expecting with augmented reality, of seeing a 3D version of a beating heart.
I'm already visualizing like the solar system hovering above your page.
Yeah, or even expanding it so it's around you. And be able to like zoom in and out of the sun, see the way, just
properties, its elements, like how it functions visually.
Yeah, we live in a
3D with the words. Yeah,
precisely. We live in a 3D world. Like the things around us should be 3D, and just 3D models will augment science books. Or will augment all these different ideas: solar systems, brains, hearts, the entire skeleton. These are like wild things that a textbook, a flat textbook that can only show images, it's a completely different experience.
Changes the game completely.
I can't wait.
It's really exciting.
Yeah, I'm just like thinking of all the books that I'm like reading now and just how they come alive. It's crazy. Okay, so we talked about 3D models hovering above. We talked about bringing books to life, whether it's through a trailer, whether it's through this idea of a 3D bookmark, like catching us up, or our environment around us, a backdrop or a background just appearing around us and bringing that book to life. We're also looking at books where, so there's this one concept that I saw of like showing a 3D stadium, and this idea wasn't reading, it was more like a 3D model that you can interact with and buy things from. So right now, when you bought a ticket to a game, you usually on an app, you can find your seats on a very 2D. Even as much as you want to see 3D, it's still very 2D. But this idea was like, imagine if you could see a stadium in front of you and really pick the seats, and you could like zoom into the seat and see what part of it.
You would be able to see if you were there.
Exactly. See your field of view from that seat and jump between different seats before buying them. So imagine that, but with a book as you're going through. So you're able to select things, touch things, buy things, ask from things. All these kind of things are definitely helpful to books. We talked about recreating the scenes that we were up to of 3D bookmarks. Okay, now let's jump into simulations and this like idea of the future library. I think now, I don't know about you guys, but I am already visualizing it, what it looks like. So I don't think we're going to have to spend too much time on this simulation. But Etti asked a great question before of like, do we have to get rid of libraries or is this going to be something new? And then she answered her own question. Like, that's what I think. Like you said, that the power of AR is that we're not ripping up everything that we have today. It's using what we have. It's using the current libraries, the current books, the current physical mediums that we love and just augmenting that. But we can also...
It'd be really cool if you could see how old a book is.
Elaborate on that.
Let's go into an older library and they have these like really washed out, really antique books. It's like seeing more information about the actual book, not only what's within the book.
Interesting. Like setting a scene or helping me understand the printing of that book and the times that it was printed. Yeah.
Well,
no, it's cool. It's not just what's within, it's how it was. That also gives us a huge amount of context onto what the author was thinking, what happened in that time. Like
translating other books.
Precisely. Translating is massive.
Like something like a biblical old book that is like in a dialect and a language that we can't even understand now, for AR and AI to be able to translate that for us is huge.
Yeah. And we could do this in a bunch of ways. We could, again, this exists now. Like it used to be World Lens, I think Google bought it. And now it's like Google Lens where you can see translation through your phone. So imagine that on a book where you can find a book in any language, get it translated to your language and still make it look like it's the same exact book, right? You're using the paper, using everything.
Just really the words are like changing in front of you. So
yeah.
You're reading it in your language, even though the actual physical book in front of you is a completely different language.
Exactly. And I want to talk about translation and like just conversations with different people in different languages, but that is for another episode. But here where this idea of translating it, we could also translate word by word, right? We don't have to change everything. We could point at a word and right on top of it, we can see the translation. imagine also, I don't think the word is phonetically, but like visually being able to see what a word means. So if we come to a word, we could dictionary it. So nowadays on a digital laptop, you can highlight a word and get the dictionary pop up. Again, augmented reality, that can work on a regular book in front of you. But you can also see the meaning of it when you want to understand a word, or maybe a word has a picture, like in Chinese where words are actual images.
Symbols, yeah.
Where words are symbols, you can visualize them and understand what they mean or they correspond to. You don't have that in English as much. Obviously, you have words like apple where you can visualize it. Some words just cannot be visualized. But imagine the words that can, or words that are difficult or different languages where you could also have images of how that word translates or what that word means hovering above it. There's so much that you can work with a current book, right? Translation, transliteration, videos that are on the web that are about that chapter that appear right next to the book, things coming to life. There's so much that we can go into.
Experience this already. It sounds insane.
It's going to come to your library.
It seems far away, but it's so close. We're so close to that in the reality we live in now.
Yeah, it's crazy to think. And also for me, I don't know if you feel this as well, but like some of these things, when I hear about them, some sound so fantastical. It's like, okay, it's never going to happen. But some of these things are just like, I want to use it now. And I also think I can get it now.
It makes so much sense. It doesn't feel out of reach.
Yeah. And the only thing that stopped us from thinking about these things is it's a different paradigm shift on what a computer is. And I think and this is part of why we do this podcast, is that all it needs is a little bit of a tweak to what is possible, what is practical with this technology. And suddenly you're like, wait, why do we still live in this world where we are walking around with these little screens or little windows to the digital world? Why doesn't the digital world exist on top of the real world?
I'm literally in the middle of having that paradigm shift.
I'm waiting to greet you on the other end. Where like and once you get to it, the entire world, you see that. And so I encourage all you guys that are listening to this, next time you go to a library or you pick up a book at your home, visualize those scenes. Open up a page and look at your old ratted bookmark and just visualize what a 3D bookmark could look like. Imagine you're in your bed, sitting on a bed with comfortable pillows around you, or you're sitting in a great beanbag, and just imagine the walls of your room just materially changing to the scene that you're reading in. And, just that entire scene just exists around it.
Wow, it's so exciting.
Now, this simulation area that's your bedroom right now could exist in libraries. So current libraries could either build a simulation room or think about brand new libraries that are not just about small little seating areas that gives you a small little space to read one book or a couple books that you have nowadays, right? It's a small little area. Imagine where libraries become more about experiencing the books. So a library might become a big room where you're walking around inside of that book. So maybe you're going back in history and you're walking through that village and the entire village is reconstructed around you, where the character is either you, first person, or it's a best friend of yours that you can have that conversation with and walk those streets. And this could be an entire room where that experience of reaching into this person's mind, where before it was just through pages, now you're actually living inside of that.
The room becomes a blank page for your visualization of the book.
Perfect. I couldn't say that better myself. The blank room becomes that blank canvas of what before was a book filled with words, now blank canvas. And you're walking around and you're experiencing it. And it doesn't all have to be interactive, but being
sitting on a couch in the room. That could be like a really comfortable couch. You're chilling, you're reading your book, and the room around you is just shifting with whatever you want it to shift with while you're reading.
Yeah. And as you walk around, it could then learn how to shift with you if you decide to pace the room or if you want to walk the scenes. Or it helps bring you off the couch. Maybe at certain points it wants you to walk. It brings you off that. And this walking is where kind of the lines blur a little bit between augmented reality and virtual reality. If you've got a room big enough where you're projecting onto the walls and you're using the actual physical infrastructure of the room, you're in that space where it's not exactly virtual reality, but you're walking through it. All right. And we can use tricks. Again, this is exactly like the gym we talked about. We can use visual tricks to make you think like you're walking down a street where really you're just walking in circles, right? So maybe it's a circular room like a dome and you're able to have that feeling. And you're not on some sort of special treadmill or you don't have these clunky shoes. the visuals around you trick you into thinking you're walking straight.
You know that new dome they have in Nevada?
The sphere.
Yeah, the sphere.
So imagine that sphere, and if you guys have seen it, like it's opening up whole new ways that we go to concerts or we experience things. Imagine that in every library. Imagine if that becomes a library that you have.
It's literally going to change the whole experience of reading and learning information.
It's changing the game.
You get to access multiple parts of your brain at once, whereas when you're just reading, you're reading.
You're literally living in the internet.
And what better way to learn than through experience?
Wow. I can't wait to discuss things with my characters, to discuss things with the author of the book, to talk with any of the characters, to walk around the scenes, to even just paint the scenes. Like, I think every house should have a sphere. Their own Las Vegas
I'm
sphere.
making a sphere room in my house. It's happening.
I think this is like before everyone has like, the office or like that place that personal computers you can start moving anywhere, laptops, but this kind of room that you can go into and experience this medium between virtual reality and augmented reality and being able to just experience literally anything. I think everyone's going to have that in their house. I think that every library is going to have that. And I guess I want to end this off with kind of ask this question. Okay, let me bring it back to Apple for a second. I really like the Apple's stores, and their designs really changed the way retail stores look like, and so many other companies try to copy them. But one thing that they started changing in the last couple of years is if you've gone to new stores where there's like trees in there nowadays and like all these people that you have concerts in them, there's a subtle shift from just a cool retail store to becoming a town square. And I think that this is something that I would like to see in libraries and actual town squares and retail stores. I think this idea of the town square where no longer a retail store is about just buying the products, but it's about learning the products. It's about interacting with other people that are learning the products. I don't know. I would just want to leave you off with this question, guys. Like, what would a library with augmented reality and artificial intelligence look like as a town square? Where it's no longer a place like this idea. Libraries never used to be quiet. They used to be very noisy places. They used to be places where people went and learned, and it wasn't a small little hush place where everyone knows now that the stereotypical meme of a librarian coming to shush you when you're like breathing. Libraries were not like that. They were about really learning and ingesting information, and they were loud places. They were kind of town squares. What does the world look like where computers are no longer windows into a digital world? They're not flat windows. Where these places are not just areas that you can put down a laptop in front of you and make sure it's connected into a charging spot, and so therefore you must have a tape. What do these places look like where the computers mold towards us, where they're more human, they're more seamless, where a library is no longer a table that you just put a book on, but you can dive into that book. You can dive into that documentary. You can maybe experience it with others. What does that town hall space look like? And what is the world going to look like where offices become town squares, where retail stores are town squares, where coffee shops are town squares, where libraries are town squares? What does that look like when this computer is no longer limiting us to the small window it is today, and it actually becomes a layer on top of the digital world, where the digital world is an augmented layer? It's one of those layers. Yeah. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that or any questions that you want to end off this podcast episode with?
I'll tell you what, I'm having a big experience right now. I've definitely learned a lot. Paradigm shift indeed.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious. Come on, tell me.
I think I just want you to expound a little more on what town square means.
Oh, okay. We've got a couple minutes. Okay, a town square is where people come together, where people share, where people are social, where we don't live in this world. For me, current technologies put us into our own bubbles, and I want people to merge with each other. A town square is where people come and feel comfortable learning, interacting with other people. It becomes social.
It's a shared experience.
Shared experience. Just think about a library. What is a library where a book is not just I'm reading a book, where I'm sharing experience with you? Why can't we both go into a history or a document? Movies are shared experiences, right? A town square library with augmented reality, artificial intelligence, where the sky's the limit on what we can do. What becomes a town square? What happens when I can immerse myself inside of that and share that with other people? That's what a town square and a library is.
Got you. Honestly, I really appreciate you having me on here. I've learned an incredible amount. And I hope that I showed up when you approached me to do the podcast and you were talking about AR and AI. And I generally have a little bit of fear associated with it. But what's important is learning about it and really understanding it and how we can utilize it in our physical space. And again, what we already have. So fears are gone. I'm very excited to see how the world turns out utilizing AR. Yeah.
Brilliant. Oh, okay. That was a big podcast. Definitely loved having you on. The questions and everything and going into it. And just like discussing things with you was amazing. I'm going to quickly end this off. If you guys have any questions, next episode, we're going to go on a hike. We're going to finish off the day with a beautiful hike. That's going to be with Dvora Leah. You guys are going to meet her in the next episode. She is delightful.
She is a very cool one.
Very cool one. And I can't think of someone better than to get on a hike and experience augmented reality with.
Guys, get excited.
This is going to be cool. Okay, we're going to end this off. If you guys have any questions that you have for me or even Etti about augmented reality in the library or augmented reality practically day to day, if you've got any questions about prior episodes or specifically about this episode, any feedback, questions, comments, anything like that, please post them down below wherever you're hearing this podcast. We'd love to have that. If you have an idea about hiking for next episode, we might even feature that. If it's a great question or if it gets us thinking, we might bring that into the next episode, so you might be featured.
Get into the shared experience.
Join our town square. Join our town square. Guys, thanks so much for listening. This was really fun. Listen, share with all your friends. Very new. Share, rate, all those kind of good stuff. Get excited for next episode that's coming out much sooner. I was trying to bring these things out earlier, but some things have been going on in the world. Had a little bit of distractions, let's say, but I'm really excited that we got to record this one now. Beautiful Friday afternoon over here. Yeah, with that, I'm going to love you and leave you. Etti, thanks so much.
Love you and leave you too.
All right, guys, I'll see you guys in the future.